Imagine this. You wake up one morning and reach for your phone, the same way you do every single day. And the first thing you see is a number. A red number. Not a small one. Not the kind you shake off over your morning coffee. The kind that makes your stomach drop before your feet even touch the floor. Your portfolio is down. Not 2%. Not 5%. We are talking about a loss so significant that 18 months of careful saving, patient discipline, and quiet conviction have been cut almost in half. Overnight, what do? If you are like most people, and I mean most people, including people who consider themselves smart, experienced, level-headed investors, the answer comes fast and it comes hard. You panic. Your hands start moving before your brain catches up. You open the trading app. You start selling. You tell yourself you are being rational, protective, smart. But here is the truth that nobody in the financial media wants to say out loud. That moment is not a market problem. It is a psychology problem. And it is the single most expensive mistake that ordinary investors make, over and over again, across every market cycle in recorded history. Today, we are going to talk about what separates the investors who lose everything in a downturn from the ones who come out the other side wealthier than before. And I promise you, it is not about better stock picks. It is not about reading more charts or finding the right YouTube channel to tell you what to buy. It is about something far older, far deeper, and far more powerful than any trading strategy ever invented. It is about learning to master the one enemy that will always have more access to your money than any market crash ever will. It is about learning to master yourself. Welcome to the Stoic Millionaire. This channel exists at the intersection of ancient Stoic philosophy and modern financial psychology. Not because philosophy is trendy, but because after studying the habits of self-made millionaires, reading the research in behavioral economics, and looking at what actually separates long-term wealth builders from everyone else, the answer keeps coming back to the same place. It is not knowledge. It is not timing. It is not access to the right information. It is discipline. It is mindset. It is the ability to feel the storm, see it clearly, and still choose not to move. If that is a skill you want to build, and it is a skill, not a personality trait you are either born with or you are not, then you are exactly where you need to be. Subscribe to this channel if you have not already. Share this video with someone in your life who needs to hear it. And if you have ever sold an investment, and lay awake that night wondering if you made a terrible mistake, stay with me. Because this episode was built for that exact moment. Let us begin. Let me tell you about a man. He is not famous. He never gave a TED Talk, or ran a hedge fund, or appeared on a financial news program telling everyone what the market was going to do next. He was, by every visible measure, completely ordinary. A mid-level professional in his early 40s, living in a modest house, raising 2 kids, driving a car that was 5 years old and showing it. But over 15 years, through nothing more than consistent monthly contributions to a simple, diversified index portfolio, he had quietly, steadily, almost invisibly accumulated close to $400,000. Not by being brilliant, not by getting lucky. Simply by showing up every month and doing the boring, unglamorous, the deeply unsexy thing that most people intend to do and then never quite get around to. Then came 2008. You know the story from the headlines. But this is the version the headlines never show. This is what happened inside the living rooms, inside the sleepless nights, inside the conversations that happen at 2 in the morning when the fear gets too loud and there is nowhere left to hide from it. In a matter of weeks, his portfolio dropped by nearly 40%. $400,000 became $240,000. And every single day, every news channel, every expert on every television screen was delivering the same message: is going to get worse. Sell now. Get out while you still have something left to protect. The pressure was not abstract. He described it later as a physical weight on his chest that never fully lifted. He would check his balance in the morning and feel genuinely sick. He would check it again at night and feel worse. His wife was frightened. His brother-in-law had already sold everything and was calling every few days, urgently, almost desperately, telling him to do the same before there was nothing left. One evening, he sat down at his desk, opened his brokerage account, and moved his cursor directly over the sell button. He stayed there for a long time. And then he did something that, in that moment, felt almost irrational. He closed the laptop. He walked to his bookshelf and pulled out a book he had not touched in years. A collection of writings by Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher. He had bought it on a whim, read half of it, set it aside. But that night, something made him reach for it. He opened to a random page and found a single line. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He read it once, then again, then a third time slowly. He did not sell. By 2013, his portfolio had not just recovered. It had grown past where it was before the crash ever began. By 2018, he retired early, not because he was smarter than the room, not because he had better information or a more sophisticated strategy, but because in the single most terrifying moment of his financial life, he understood one thing that most investors spend entire careers never fully grasping. The market was not the threat. He was. His own fear, his own desperate need to do something in the face of uncertainty. That was the real and only enemy. And the moment he recognized it for what it was, he disarmed it completely. What happened to that man is not unique. Behavioral economists have studied this pattern for decades, and the data is not encouraging for the average investor. A landmark long-term study tracked the actual returns earned by average investors over a 30-year period and compared them to the returns of the broader market index. The market returned approximately 10% annually. The average investor, less than 3%, same market. Completely different outcomes. The gap was not explained by fees or access or intelligence. It was explained by behavior, specifically by the compulsive, emotion-driven tendency to sell at the worst possible moment and buy back in far too late. This is where Stoicism enters the conversation. And I want to be precise here, because Stoicism is widely misunderstood. It is not pessimism. It is not the philosophy of people who have given up on feeling things. The Stoics felt everything. Marcus Aurelius wrote with raw honesty about grief and anxiety and the crushing weight of uncertainty. Epictetus, a former slave who became one of the most influential philosophers in Western history, lived a life of real suffering and still chose clarity over bitterness. Seneca wrestled openly with the seductions of wealth and the terror of loss. What Stoicism teaches is not the elimination of emotion. It is the mastery of response. At the center of Stoic philosophy is a distinction so simple it almost sounds too obvious to be useful. Until you try to apply it in the middle of a market crash at 2 in the morning. The Stoics called it the dichotomy of control. Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. Epictetus. Applied to investing, this principle cuts with extraordinary precision. You cannot control the market. You cannot control interest rates, inflation, geopolitical shocks, or the collective psychology of millions of other investors acting simultaneously in fear and greed. You cannot control when the next crash comes or how far it goes. What you can control is your strategy, your time horizon, your savings rate, your asset allocation, and most critically, your response in the moments when everything around you is screaming that you should run. Modern neuroscience has spent decades confirming what the Stoics intuited 2,000 years ago without a single brain scan. When we perceive a financial threat, a portfolio in freefall, a catastrophic headline, a trusted voice telling us the world is ending, the amygdala fires. Cortisol floods the system. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational thought, long-term planning, and measured judgment, is effectively taken offline by the brain's ancient survival circuitry. In that state, you are not investing, you are surviving. And survival instincts, built to help your ancestors escape predators, are spectacularly ill-equipped to manage a retirement portfolio through a bear market. The most disciplined investors in the world are not immune to this. They feel it. What separates them is not the absence of fear. It is the presence of a philosophy, a framework, a set of hard rules built in advance, specifically to prevent feeling from becoming action in moments when action would be catastrophic. They have trained themselves, through deliberate practice and conscious design, to pause between the emotion and the response. That pause, that single breath of space between feeling and acting, is where fortunes are made and kept. And the most important thing I can tell you about that pause is this: you can build it right now, before the next crash, before you need it. So what does this actually look like in practice? How do you move from someone who checks their portfolio every hour during a downturn to someone who can watch a significant portion of their net worth disappear and still choose not to act from fear? It begins with what the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, the deliberate premeditation of hardship. Before the storm arrives, you sit with it, you imagine it in detail. Not to frighten yourself, to vaccinate yourself. Ask yourself honestly, right now, if my portfolio dropped 30% tomorrow morning, what would I actually do? Not what you think the right answer is. What would you genuinely do? If any part of that answer is uncertain, you are not yet prepared. And an unprepared investor in a crisis is one of the most financially dangerous things in existence. The first practical tool is an investment thesis document. Before you buy any position, write down in plain, honest language exactly why you are buying it. What is the long-term case? What would need to be true for this to be a good investment over the next decade? What specific conditions, not price movements, but fundamental changes, would actually justify selling? That document becomes your anchor when everything else is moving. When the market crashes and your nervous system is overriding your judgment, you return to that document. If the thesis is still intact, if the business is still sound, the fundamentals unchanged, then the price dropping is not a reason to sell. It is actually a reason to consider buying more. The document protects you from the version of yourself that exists only in the middle of the night during a crisis. The second tool is a pre-committed cooling off rule. Simple and devastatingly effective. You commit in writing before any crisis happens to never making a significant financial decision during a period of acute emotional distress. If your portfolio drops 10% in a single week, you are not permitted to make any changes for 72 hours. You write this rule down. You tell someone who will hold you to it. You make it a rule with real weight, not a preference you can talk yourself out of. The research is unambiguous on this point. The vast majority of panic selling decisions happen within the first 48 hours of a significant drawdown. By the time most investors have slept, stepped back, and looked at their original reasoning, they recognize they were moments away from a catastrophic error. The cooling off rule gives your rational mind time to reassert itself before your emotional mind does permanent damage to your future. The third tool is automation. Remove yourself from the decision as much as mechanically possible. Automate your contributions on a fixed schedule. Same amount, same date, every single month, regardless of what the headlines say. This enforces dollar-cost averaging without requiring a single emotionally charged choice. You buy more when prices are low and less when prices are high, automatically, without ever having to feel the discomfort of doing it consciously. The fourth tool is deliberate information restriction. If you are someone who panics during downturns, stop checking your portfolio daily. This is not denial. This is strategy backed by data. Investors who review their portfolios less frequently make measurably better long-term decisions. Set a quarterly review date. Outside of that date, close the app. The market will be exactly where it is when you open it again, and you will be in a far better state of mind to respond to it. And the fifth tool, possibly the most underrated of all, is the deliberate construction of your financial community. The man in our story almost sold because of the daily calls from his brother-in-law. The people around you shape your financial decisions far more than most people acknowledge. Find people who share a long-term, disciplined, philosophy-driven approach to building wealth. Read the writing of those who have navigated multiple full market cycles and emerged stronger. Build your mental environment with the same intentionality you bring to building your portfolio. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Marcus Aurelius. The same principle applies without exception to investing. Stop arguing about what the right investor does. Stop watching. Stop reacting. Be the investor you already know, in your clearest moments, that you should be. Let us go back to the man. Years after 2008, someone asked him what he had been thinking during those weeks. The weeks when everything was dropping. when every voice around him was urging him to run, when he sat at his desk with his cursor over the sell button and chose not to press it. He said he thought about his grandfather. His grandfather had lived through the Great Depression, had watched banks collapse and farms foreclose and neighbors lose in a single season everything they had spent a lifetime building. And yet, somehow, stubbornly, quietly, his grandfather had not just survived. He had built a life, not because he was brilliant, not because he had information others lacked, because he had an almost irrational, almost defiant faith in the long game, because he understood, in his bones, that the storm is never the end of the story. His grandfather used to say something that sounds almost too simple to be wisdom. The sun came up today. It will come up tomorrow. Act accordingly. That is stoicism. Not the academic kind. Not the kind that lives in philosophy lectures or ancient texts behind glass cases. The lived kind. The kind that is forged in real fear and real uncertainty and the very real choice. Available to every single person in this moment. To not let what is happening outside dictate what happens inside. Here is what I want you to leave this video with. Not as a concept you found interesting and then forgot. As a practice you actually use. The next time your portfolio drops. And it will, because that is what markets do. That is the price of admission for every return you have ever earned. Before you open the trading app, before you make a single move, before you pick up the phone to call anyone, pause. Breathe once, completely, and ask yourself this one question: has anything actually changed about the long-term value of what I own? Not the price, the value. Because price and value are not the same thing. They diverge in exactly the moments that feel most terrifying. And every investor who has ever built real, lasting, generational wealth, every single one, has gotten there by understanding that difference at precisely the moment when everyone around them forgot it entirely. The market will crash again. It always has and it always will. The economy will contract. The headlines will be terrifying. Experts will say it is different this time. Your social media feed will fill with people who claim they saw it coming and sold everything at exactly the right moment. None of that is new. None of it has ever been new. And every single time it has happened throughout market history, the investors who held their ground, who trusted their process, who mastered their response, who refused to let fear write their financial story, came out on the other side in a position that most people spend their entire lives only wishing for. That can be you. Not because you are smarter than the market. Not because you have some edge the professionals do not. But because you are willing to do the one thing that most people are not willing to do. To sit inside discomfort, to feel the fear fully, and to choose, deliberately and consciously, not to flinch. He who fears death will never do anything worthy of a man who is alive. Seneca. Replace the word death with market crash, and you have one of the most powerful investment philosophies ever articulated in a single sentence. If this video gave you something real, if something in it shifted the way you think about money, about emotion, about the long game, then do one thing before you close this tab. Share it. Send it to someone in your life who is currently afraid. Someone watching their portfolio and feeling that weight. Someone who needs to hear that the storm has never once been the end of the story. And subscribe to this channel, because we are just getting started. Every week, we go deeper into the philosophy, the psychology, the real habits, and the real stories of people who built lasting wealth, not by being the most informed in the room, but by being the most disciplined. The Stoic millionaire is not a destination you arrive at. It is a practice you commit to. And it begins right here. We will see you in the next one.